Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is term 2A. This is class number 2, and we're going to be looking at some grammar and then assignment number 1 today, and be looking at subjects and predicates. This is Jillian Percy. Just wanted to check, Linda, are you there? And can you hear me? Supposed to be. I was told by Katie that I'd be able to see people. Hang on a second. Let me see. Okay. All right. At least I know where people are. Awesome. Okay. So contact information. If you are sending me a student work, send it into studentwork@nnec.on.ca. That way the secretary can log that you submitted the work. Please include your full name, course name, assignment number, and name. And if an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which is which and include them both in the same email. If you need to take a photograph of an assignment, please send it as an attachment. Like assignments number 3 and 4, people usually do that for. If you send it directly in the body of the email, it's kind of hard for us to print off and it doesn't show properly on the computer. We have on the screen our Zoom number. You can also check out previous classes on YouTube at capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. If you have a question about an assignment, message me at jillian.percy@nnecschools.org, or if you want to talk to me while I'm in the office, 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. Okay, let's take a look at where we are today. Okay, what is the difference between the term 1A and the term 2A recordings? Well, term 1A was my first time teaching in this radio Zoom format, and I moved very quickly through the first assignments. I also feel like I didn't talk enough about grammar and other conventions at the beginning of the course. Term 2A is my third time teaching in this format. And I think I moved much more slowly through the material and explained things a lot more thoroughly. I also spend a lot more time discussing grammar and the writing process right from the beginning, because it makes it much easier for me to explain why something is considered incorrect. Or, for example, if I want to suggest you need to use a conjunction to join a sentence, we both understand what I mean by that. So that's kind of why I cover grammar a little more than I did the first time through. So yesterday we talked about how a sentence needs to have a subject and a predicate. Remember that the subject tells us who or what is the main topic or actor in the sentence. By actor, I mean the one who's doing the action. I don't mean like a movie star. And the subject will be either a noun or a pronoun, or sometimes later on we'll look at like noun clauses and stuff. But for right now, we'll stick with kind of the simpler stuff. So a simple subject is just a noun, like the boy, or a pronoun, like he went to the store. A complete subject is all the adjectives, articles, and nouns that make up the entire subject. So if I said the little red coat was too small, the complete subject is the little red coat. But the simple subject, okay, it's working. Wiagamo. All right, I'm sorry, someone's trying to communicate something with me. I've got, let me see here. Me and Linda still. Okay. And Wiagamo is able to hear me right now too? Is that it? Oh, okay, no problem. I'm glad you can hear me. That's awesome. All right, well, I'm kind of rattling away here. If you have any questions though, just stop me and ask me a question, okay? Okay, sounds good. All right. Compound subject is when we have 2 or more nouns or pronouns that are the main topics in the sentence. Like if I say boys and girls, they're both doing, and it says enjoying playing tag. The boys and the girls are both subjects. We call that a compound subject. And then sometimes a subject might be a pronoun. There are a whole bunch of pronouns, but in this case, it's going to be the subject pronouns, which are I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. So this is like, I ran to the store, you are allowed to come over, he went fishing, she is on the porch, and we can eat now. Or they are going to the garbage dump. And I think we talked about this yesterday. In English, the subject generally comes right in front of the main verb. It's not always at the beginning of the sentence. Sometimes there's other stuff coming in front, but if you find the verb like ran, generally the subject is right in front of it. So why does it even matter whether a sentence has a subject? Well, a lot of times when we're just talking with people, we may drop the subject out of the sentence because we already know who or what they're talking about. But in writing, we can't really do that. So, for example, if your friend asks you, hey, what do you want to do tonight? In conversation, it would totally be fine to say, go dancing, because they know what you're talking about. But in writing, we have to have a subject because we're missing that information. And if they're confused, they can't ask for more information. So we would have to write, I want to go dancing. And sometimes at first that can feel sort of weirdly formal, but unfortunately, writing just is a little more formal than talking because, again, the person isn't right there to ask for more information. Okay, I have a little video here, but I think we're going to skip over it unless we have a thing I'll come back to it if we need it. Okay, so look at these simple sentences. Do they have a subject or not? If it does, we're going to highlight it. So if I look at the sentence, she cries, does it have a subject? Well, crying is our verb, and she is the person who's doing the crying, so she's our subject. Then if we look at a sentence like going swimming, well, we can see what they're going to be doing, but we don't know who or what. So no, this one doesn't have a subject. If I said Peter and Daniel like to fish, okay, well, we can see what they want to do. They're going to like to fish. Who's doing it? Well, Peter and Daniel. So that is our subject. Watching the fireworks. Okay, so we know what they're doing. Do we know who or what? No, it doesn't tell us who's watching the fireworks. Could be a family, could be a couple, could be some animals. We don't know. We'd have to put something in there. So for right now, that one doesn't have a subject. We would need to fix that. I am happy. Is there a subject there? Yeah. And this was one I find sometimes people don't notice because it's just a tiny little, one letter word, but I is the subject. Okay. Hi, Charlotte. Welcome to the class. The little green snake slithered away. Is there a subject there? Well, it's slithered, and right before slithered is the animal snake. Snake is our subject, and the whole phrase is the little green snake. So I'm just going to kind of underline that so you get used to it. Okay, typed a message. Well, we know what they're doing. They're typing, but do we know who or what is doing the typing? No, we really don't. So that one does not have a subject, which means it's an incomplete sentence. The nurse is coming back. So is coming, there's our verb. So what's our subject? Basically, nurse. So that's a complete sentence. Climbed a tree. All right, well, climbing's an action, but we don't have any words in front telling me who or what is doing the climbing. So that is not got a subject, which means that it's an incomplete sentence. And again, some of these are sentences we would use in conversation. If somebody said, hey, where's little Amy? Climbed a tree would be totally fine to say in conversation. But in writing, I have to say Amy climbed a tree or she climbed a tree. Okay. Oh, okay. So this one, sorry, we did it the other day and then I forgot to fix it. So we're going to kind of skip over that. This was just one where I'd left off the subject and we had to add the subject. Okay, quick review of parts of speech. Parts of speech are basically just the jobs that words can do in a sentence, right? Because anything in a sentence, it has a job, it has a reason for being there, right? Some words can do more than one job because in part, a lot of words may have more than one meaning, right? So if I had a word like run, it can mean like the action, like I run down the street, or I could say, hey, I'm going to log in and get myself enrolled in that 5K run. Well, in that case, the 5K run is like the name of the race, in which case it's acting as a noun. So it's important to know like that words don't just fit in one job and stay there forever. What they do in the sentence can change what they're considered. So articles are pretty simple. There's only 3 articles in English, and they generally introduce a noun. So a, an, or the. Nouns we talked about a lot yesterday, a person, place, thing, or idea. So things like doctor, street, tape, or war. The idea one is the hardest one. They're called like abstract nouns. and they represent concepts like freedom, democracy, slavery, love, those kind of things. Pronouns replace a noun. We kind of already talked about those. Adjectives. Adjectives describe or modify a noun. Words like big, French, pretty, shiny, sunny, hot. Verbs, talked about a little bit yesterday, show an action like jump, dream, drive, or they can also show a state of being. In other words, if I said I am cold, the verb is am and it's telling what that person is like. Now, those are ones we talked about. These are the newer ones we're going to be talking about today. Adverbs. Adverbs can describe or modify a verb. They can also modify an adjective or another adverb. So things like very, carefully, tomorrow, next, slowly, happily, and gently. I find the ly ones are ones that are easy to identify, but words like tomorrow, sometimes we don't recognize those as adverbs. Conjunctions. Conjunctions join two clauses or two simple sentences together. Remember that a clause has a subject and a verb. Some examples of conjunctions are for, and, nor, but, yet, so, or, after, if, although. And then prepositions are a word that helps connect a noun or a pronoun to the other parts of the sentence, usually the main part of the sentence, by showing relationships such as location, belonging, time. Some examples would be words like over, under, by, at, during, with, between, and from. And then finally, interjections, which we're not going to talk about a whole lot. They come up a lot more in conversation, but basically a word that is shouted to get attention or express extreme emotion. Like if you heard somebody yelling, hey, no, wow, ouch. They're kind of just one word. They stand by themselves. They don't really a part of a sentence. Okay. So here we were just talking about parts of speech, but there's also something called parts of a sentence, right? So parts of speech is looking at the micro level, that just the words, whereas parts of a sentence are looking at the functions of words or groups of words in a sentence. And there's basically two main parts of a sentence, the subject and the predicate. Remember that in English, the subject always comes in front of the predicate. So today we're going to understand a bit more time understanding predicates. Sometimes people find it a little bit weird that I can say, well, this word is a noun, but it's also a subject. But it just means that noun is one small part of a much bigger category, which is called the subject. And then a subject is part of the category called a clause. And a clause might be a sentence all by itself, or it might be one part of a more complicated sentence. But if you think of a sentence like a map, it makes more sense. So let's say I'm looking at Thunder Bay, right? Thunder Bay is one small part of larger Northern Ontario. And Northern Ontario is one small part of a much greater area called all of Ontario. And then Ontario is one small part of Canada. So when we're comparing parts of a sentence versus parts of speech, that's why a job can seem to have, or a word can seem to have two different jobs. So for example, if I said a baby bald eagle soared, eagle is the noun, but it's also the subject, right? The complete subject is a baby bald eagle. The simple subject, or what they think of as the basic subject, is just eagle. And then we've got a very simple predicate. The whole thing is the sentence. Okay, so now we're looking at unit 1. The 4 units that we're going to be going through, they're not equal in terms of work. And sometimes I find this is a bit discouraging because the first unit is the longest and it has the most assignments. It has 18. And sometimes people assume, well, that means all the units are going to have 18, but they don't. It actually kind of gets shorter and shorter as you go along. Unit 2 has only 11 assignments. Unit 3 has only 10 assignments, and then Unit 4 has only 5 assignments, although they're kind of longer assignments that will take you more time. So this course is designed to help you acquire and demonstrate the cross-curricular literacy skills that are evaluated by the Ontario Secondary School Literacy Test. That's a requirement that everybody has to meet to be able to say they've graduated high school. When you're younger, you have to write the test, and then if you get older, they just substitute this course for the test instead. If this course is completed, it meets the provincial literacy requirement, and is counted as a full credit in English. You'll read a variety of informational, narrative, and graphic texts, and you will produce a variety of forms of writing, including summaries, information paragraphs, news reports, and opinion pieces. You will also manage and maintain a portfolio containing a record of your reading experiences and samples of your writing. I'm going to just mention that now because sometimes I've had people at the end of the course tell me, oh, they threw out their writing assignments from earlier once I marked them. But at the very end of this course, you have to kind of resubmit a portfolio of certain of your assignments. So you need to hang on to everything you do, find a file folder or a drawer or someplace just to kind of stash it because you need it again at the very end. So don't throw your stuff out. Okay. I'm just mentioning that because I've had that happen a few times and people are very, very unhappy at that. So this course is broken down into 4 units. Each unit has 5 lessons. Altogether, there's 20 lessons. However, a lesson can have like 3 or 4 assignments, or it might just have one big assignment. You'll be encouraged to have regular contact with your teacher during the course. Also, throughout the course, you'll be asked to evaluate your own progress with your work by responding to the feedback from your teacher. We also do like journal entries on your progress, which get marked as well. If you're willing to put the time and an honest effort, you'll be successful with the course. Be sure to ask for help if you need it along the way. So now we're looking at kind of the overall course outline in terms of all the assignments add up to about 70% of your mark. The portfolio of your work that we talked about is going to be 10% of your mark. And then there's a final exam that is worth 20% of your mark. You need to make sure that you've got units 1 to 4. We usually send paper copies, but if you need a digital copy for some reason, let us know and we can send that up. And then there's a novel called Jimmy Comes Home. Don't start reading it yet because we have a bunch of assignments that come or starts around assignment 6. So hang on, don't start reading it yet. Occasionally I have people read the whole thing before we do anything, and then it kind of gets confusing for the assignments. Okay, so unit 1 has these 5 assignments. These are kind of basic getting to know you assignments. We talk about the grandfather teachings. We talk about your community and what it was like growing up there. We do a little personality quiz on your communication skills and your temperament. And then you write like a little journal entry telling me about yourself. Because I'm not seeing you in person, it just kind of gives me a way to picture you, picture how old you are, what you're like, and what you're looking for in this course. Lesson 2 is where we start kind of really doing a deep dive into the novel. And there's little assignments about reading strategies and asking questions. And then we do a journal entry about our learning. Then we start to look in lesson 3 at news reports. We read news reports and try and understand them. And then we also write a news report, do a good copy and a rough copy. That's kind of our biggest writing assignment at that point. Then there's a lesson 4 called Sit Down and Write, where we look at kind of a song lyric. We practice some editing, and then we do another journal. And then lesson 5 is writing your own questions about what we've been reading and answering them and then looking back. We have a lot of journals because it is one of the requirements from the government. After that, you're finished unit 1, and then we're looking at unit 2. Unit 2, the big writing project comes up right up front. I don't know why. Sorry, we have to do a brochure, which we'll talk more about later. Then we do in lesson 7, a bunch of assignments that are all about reading textbooks and finding information in textbooks. I find people are worried about those, but actually they go really quick. They're usually really easy assignments to do. Then lesson 8, we make predictions and we talk about our opinions. And then we start looking at things like symbols and advertising. And then we're finished that and we're on to unit 3, which, yep, okay. We talk about visuals, things like graphs, maps. And then we talk about some things that are not really discussed so much in grade school, but we discuss more when we're looking at high school and college level work. Things like subject, audience, purpose, form, style, and tone. Then lesson 13. Lesson 13 is a big one. It only has one assignment, but each one of those assignments is actually worth a fair bit. Sometimes people try and race through it and then they end up having to kind of redo it. So take your time when we get there. And then we start looking at sort of businessy things. We look at writing a cover letter, creating a resume, using an organizer to help yourself write something. And then we're at the last unit. And at that point, we start talking about the characters and looking back at the book and seeing what we think about things. We write a summary about the author. We look into how to get scholarship money in case you want to go on after high school. And then our big assignment for lesson 19 is writing an essay where you're expressing an opinion about your writing and reading. That's probably, I think, one of the hardest ones, but it's also the last one. And then we do the literacy portfolio, which is just putting together some of the assignments we ask for, and you send it back into me. So it doesn't take too long. Unit 1 is really the longest part. Okay. So our first assignment looks at the grandfather teachings and how they've impacted your life. To help us get ready for that assignment, I thought we might watch a little video on the grandfather teaching. Here is just a little playlist of different people discussing the teachings and how they affect them or their life. We may not have time for all of them. I'm just going to start and just kind of show you in case you want to refer to it. You can look it up and watch it later. Sometimes I have people say, well, we didn't really follow the grandfather teachings, and that's fine. But most of the grandfather teachings are highlighting certain virtues like honesty, bravery, truthfulness. And most people have been taught, regardless of what their religion is, that those things are valuable. So even if you don't want to talk about it in terms of the grandfather teachings, you can kind of still talk about how those virtues have helped you. So hang on, let me quickly punch in here. Now as far as I understand.
Oh gosh! Oh my gosh!
Oh my goodness, what happened there? My apologies, guys. Oh, nope. All right. I had that set up, but it didn't work right, probably. Sorry about that. Anyways, if you enter it in the YouTube, it will definitely come up. Okay, so here, when it's saying less than 180 marks, they mean all 5 assignments, not just this first assignment. This first assignment is only worth 20 marks, okay? One of the indirectly stated themes in the novel is going to be the importance of walking the red road, or what's called sometimes the right path in life. The main character is a boy named Jimmy. He's the main character in the novel. Jimmy comes home and he struggles with different issues in himself and in his community that in some way have probably affected all of us. Along the way, Jimmy has different opportunities to choose which path he's going to travel. And like all of us, Jimmy is not perfect. However, he's got different resources, including elders of his community who try to help him. Robert Checkwich, the author, has tried to weave the 7 grandfather teachings into the fabric of the book through the characters' actions. They don't talk about it so much, but they show it through their actions rather than their words. So before we step into the course, we're going to just kind of visit those teachings as they become your greatest teacher throughout the course and throughout your life. Now, this is just one story of how the grandfather teachings came to the people. Your community or family may not find these teachings important or valuable, or maybe you have a slightly different story. It's just kind of a way to introduce it. So hopefully everyone will be able to kind of take it in that level. The creator gave 7 grandfathers who were very powerful spirits the responsibility to watch over the people. The grandfathers saw that the people were living a hard life. So they sent their helper to spend time amongst the people and find a person who could be taught how to live in harmony with creation. Their helper went to the 4 directions to find a person worthy enough to bring to the grandfathers. And while the boy was traveling with Otter, they were visited 7 times by spirits who told them about the gifts. And here is what they said. To cherish knowledge is to know wisdom. To know love is to know peace. To honor all of creation is to have respect. Bravery is to face the foe with integrity. Honesty in facing a situation is to be brave. Humility is to know yourself as a sacred part of creation. And truth is to know all of these things. Otter returned to his friend, who, because of all the time spent in the spirit world, was now an old man. The old man gathered all the people around and told them of his journey to the 7 grandfathers' lodge. He explained how to use the gifts, and he explained that the opposite of any of the gifts would lead to ruin. He gave them the understanding of opposites. It was now up to the people to follow the path laid out before them. The old man gave them all they needed for the development of the spiritual side of life. So the teachings as noted in the piece above, wisdom, love, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, and truth will now be the focus of your first assignment in the course. You are to think about each of these teachings and what they mean to your life. And then you share your thoughts in about a half page of writing in paragraph format. I'm going to be talking about all these little parts in a minute. You might want to write down some ideas about each teaching to help you get started with your writing. So, for example, with regards to wisdom as a teaching, maybe some words that immediately come to mind are things like knowledge, understanding, or positive attitude. If need be, you can use a dictionary or a thesaurus for more information. However, I want to point out, I'm not expecting you just to look these up and give me the dictionary definition. I'm far more interested in what they mean to you or how you feel like you've demonstrated or even not demonstrated those teachings throughout your life. Sometimes different parts of our life, one teaching may be more important than other. As you work through this course and experience the various successes and challenges it will bring, try to keep these teachings in mind. They will help you persevere and get through any parts of the course you may find challenging. So we're going to write and submit 2 copies of this assignment. And here's the thing. One's going to be your rough copy where you kind of work out your ideas. And then you're going to hand in your final copy, which is where you've revised and kind of corrected things. And that is also worth 10. And altogether, the whole assignment is worth 20. Now, sometimes people hand me in a rough assignment and the good copy, and they look exactly the same, except they made their writing neater. So we're going to talk about that and how to kind of handle it a little bit differently, because I think it's a really important point. Keep in mind, you have to hand in both. If you only hand in one, I don't know whether it's supposed to be the rough copy or the final copy. And as we get farther in the course, they don't get marked the same. Sometimes the rough copy is worth like 10 and the final copy is worth 20. Until I know which one it is, I can't really mark it. The other thing is I'm always looking for changes between the rough copy and the good copy, and I'm hoping to see improvements. And if I don't, it does affect your marks. So I can't really mark it if you only send me one. So hang on, and we're going to skip over. Okay. Sometimes we assume people who write just put the pen on the paper and out come beautiful sentences with perfect spelling and grammar without any effort at all. But in reality, writing is a lot of work. And most people who write for a living follow certain steps. Now, they circle around and may do certain steps over and over again, but these are generally the steps that people do when they're writing. First is where you're pre-planning and brainstorming. This is the step I find most people want to skip over because they're just used to working in class where you've got to write fast and you don't really have time to think about things. But now you're working independently, so you've got plenty of time to sit down, write some notes, and think about what you want to write. Then we do a rough draft, and that is where you first start putting your ideas into sentences and paragraphs. You're not worrying too much about spelling or punctuation. You're just getting your ideas down. And then revising. Revising is the big step. That's where you're going back through and really polishing up your writing and trying to make it the best it can be. At that point, you're looking at punctuation and your word choice and whether your ideas are coming across or do you need to add some more details, that kind of thing. Editing is just the nitpicky stuff, right? Have you got the right punctuation? Have you got the spelling? All the little things that are easy to overlook. Final draft or publishing. For our purposes, publishing is just when you send it to me, right? Because once you've sent it to me, you don't have time to change it again. Now, having said that, if you're very unhappy with a mark, let me know and you can always redo it and I will happily remark things. That's fine. Okay. This assignment suggests writing down what each teaching means to you. And that's because they want to put it, you to put it in your own words. But what I find is sometimes students kind of panic and instead they look it up in the dictionary and then they try to put that in a sentence, but they just kind of copy it. So if I was looking in the dictionary for the word honesty, it tells me that it's a noun, it breaks it up into syllables. I could click on this and hear how to say it. It tells me the plural. If I clicked on this blue link, it would tell me some synonyms. And then it'll say like 1A, adherence to the facts, sincerity. Sincerity would be a synonym. and then it uses it kind of in a sentence. Then it gives me a different possible definition, fairness and straightforwardness of conduct. And then it shows me that in another sentence. So some people will tell me honesty is, and they'll copy all this down, and they don't notice that it doesn't quite make sense because dictionary definitions aren't written as great sentences. They're just meant to give you the idea of what it means. So if you copy it straight out of the dictionary, you can end up with a sentence that doesn't make a lot of sense, like the one below. To me, honesty is an adherence to the facts, sincerity, fairness, straightforward of conduct. This doesn't sound right because generally we don't talk this way. It is also considered plagiarism. Plagiarism is when you copy someone else's words, but don't give credit to the source and make it sound like it's just your ideas. So plagiarism can have various consequences, from having to redo an assignment or fail, or possibly even fail a course if you were doing a lot of repeated plagiarism. Now, in this case, it's our very first assignment, so I just assume people are feeling nervous. But I'm really more looking for, hey, in my life, my mom always talked to me about how important being honest was. And I saw that in how she dealt with other people. And I noticed how important it was in my life because this happened and this happened. I'm really more looking for how it connects to you. I'm not looking for a dictionary definition, okay? Um, Putting the concept into your own words would create a more natural sounding sentence. And it's almost always going to be more grammatical too. I think honesty means telling the truth without holding anything back. I find it is especially important to be honest with people when you have made a mistake rather than trying to hide it. I think honesty is hard to live up to because sometimes there can be hard consequences to telling the truth. So if you do use a dictionary, just let me know. Hey, I looked in Webster's for this, and only pick one. Don't try and use all of them. Some dictionaries might list like 10 definitions for a word. That becomes really long because we're only writing half a page. And then again, always connect it to some examples from your own life. And if you don't like one dictionary definition or you think it's confusing, pick a different one. You should have some either in your learning center or there's a whole bunch online if you want one. So we talked about this. Okay, here's a different definition. Here they talked about the quality or factor being honest, uprightness and fairness, and then truthfulness, sincerity, or frankness. I don't like this definition, but this one makes sense. So here's an example of how I could use the dictionary, but I tell you that I use the dictionary. And then I connect back to my life. So I said, the Webster Dictionary states that honesty is being truthful, sincere, or frank. So now that's not plagiarism because I told you I got it from somewhere else. But I think truthfulness is the most important part of honesty. In my life, people who were dishonest caused me a lot of pain. I have seen the harm to others when I have not been honest as well. So that's kind of an example of what I'm looking for. You may not go into a lot of detail on every single teaching. There may be some that really don't seem important to you, or maybe some that are really important to you that you've got a lot to say about, and that's fine. Also, remember to use a paragraph format. A paragraph format is like what you'd see in a novel, not a list format. So here is an example of a list format. To me, honesty is telling the truth, space. Bravery is to have courage, space. Wisdom is about being smart and knowing what to do. But a paragraph format, all the sentences just follow one right after each other like a little train. To me, honesty is telling the truth. Bravery is to have courage. Wisdom is about being smart and knowing what to do. Now, this is actually going a little quick. I would want some details, but I just kind of wanted to show you because I get a lot of people handing this in to me, but this paragraph format is what I'm really looking for. And it's your first assignment. Again, I mark it pretty leniently because it's our first assignment, but I'm just kind of show you. What is the biggest problem people have with this assignment? Usually people spend a lot of time making their rough draft as perfect as they can, but then they don't have anything left to change or make better for their good copy. So they hand it in to me and it's exactly the same, or maybe they've changed a word or two. It's way better to spend a lot of time brainstorming before you write and then just spend like a quick amount of time doing your rough draft. You might even set a timer on for like 20 minutes. And it might just be okay at that point. You might have a lot of mistakes. That's fine. Do a photocopy of that, take a picture of it, send that in to me as your rough draft. Then now take the time to polish up and make it perfect and send that in to me as your good copy. And that way I've got things to mark and I can see how your thoughts work, right? So here is an example of my brainstorming. And I'm sorry, it's kind of messy because this is my real handwriting. It's not done. It's just me trying to think of ideas. So I listed the different grandfather teachings, and then I thought of what they made me think of. Some of them I had more to say about. Like I had a lot to say about bravery and a lot to say about humility. I wasn't really sure what to say about truth and honesty because they seem really similar to me. But this at least is my brainstorming. I probably would spend more time before I started writing, but this is just to give you an idea. So here's an example of me turning one chunk of my brainstorming into just one small part. This isn't the whole thing, but just one part of my rough draft. I feel like the grandfather teachings are important to live life. Bravery has always been the most important one for me. I am not naturally very brave. I always want to hide away from hard things. But many of the best events in my life have happened because I was brave. And I did things even when it was really hard for me, like moving away from home. Now, obviously, I need to write more. This is just the beginning, right? And again, some teachings I may not have as much to say about. I may have a lot more. That's all fine. I'm not expecting it to be exactly equal. The other thing you may have noticed is this has spelling mistakes. It has punctuation mistakes. And again, I don't really worry too much about that when I'm marking it. I might show you that you've made the mistakes just so you know how to fix it. But I don't mark you down for that because I don't expect that from your rough draft. So don't worry if you see a bunch of markings. The markings just mean I'm trying to show you how to make sure it's correct. It doesn't mean I'm marking you against it, okay? So now I would take that rough draft and I would try to make it better. And the more grammar that we learn, the more we're going to notice those mistakes. However, our very first priority is you need to make sure that your sentences make sense. In other words, I can tell what you're trying to get across. Then after that, we want to make sure that you've used end punctuation such as periods, question marks, or exclamation points. For today, please avoid colons and semicolons unless you feel really confident about their correct usage. Also, be really cautious with commas because they're easy to misuse. One important point, you can't join two sentences with a comma. People do that a lot. I think it's coming as that's how we do it in Facebook, but it's not really considered appropriate for academic writing. And we will talk more about that later, but I can't cover everything the first day. We will also want to check our spelling, and we want to make sure every sentence starts with a capital letter. Keep in mind the word I should always be a capital or a big letter, never a little letter, okay? Any names would also start with a capital letter. So if you talk about your Uncle Peter, you would write capital U and a capital P. So here I've made some corrections. I feel like the grandfather teachings are important to live a good life. Bravery has been the most important teaching for me. I am not naturally very brave. I always want to hide away from hard things. Many of the best events in my life have happened because I was brave. For example, I felt brave when I moved away from home for the first time. So the big thing I did here was I fixed up some of my spelling mistakes, but also I tend to do a lot of run-on sentences where I join a bunch of sentences together. And so I shortened some of those. So they're a little bit easier to read and to understand. If a sentence goes on and on and on forever, it can get kind of confusing. Where are we? We've got a bit of time. Okay. So hang on, did I? Oh, okay. What I plan to do here, I didn't quite make that work. Hang on a second. Grammar basics. Yes. So in your unit 1, page 9 to page 16 includes a whole bunch of grammar basics. It is a great place to check and review your knowledge of parts and speech. We talked about a little bit of that today. Some things I'm just going to skip over because I think there's too much at once and we'll talk about it later. And others we're going to go into more detail as I think they need more information to understand properly. So we talked about subjects earlier. I'm going to talk about predicates now. A predicate is basically the verb plus all the other words that are attached or connected to the verb. So let's look at what might get connected to the verb through. You might have a direct object, which is a noun or a pronoun that receives the verb action, like I threw the football. An indirect object might get attached. That's usually the person who receives the direct object. I threw John the football. So John's the person that caught the football. Or an adverb or adverb phrase describing the verb. I threw carefully. And then we could have a prepositional phrase such as I threw to the goalposts. The only reason this matters is sometimes people aren't sure, but a lot of times anything that comes after the verb belongs to the predicate, basically. So an example might be, I threw the football carefully to the goalposts. I threw John the football carefully. So most sentences won't have just one. They can have multiple parts. And then all of this section, that whole thing would be what's called my complete predicate. Sorry, hang on. Right? This part, just the word through, that's my simple or my basic predicate. Here, this whole thing is my complete predicate. This part, just the word through, is my simple predicate. Okay. There are three main types of predicates, just like we had with subjects. Simple predicate is the verb or the verb phrase. The complete predicate is all the words attached to the verb, which we just talked about. Jason threw the ball. I am running to the beach. Am running is the simple predicate. Am running to the beach is the complete predicate. This comes up because later on I ask you to check these kinds of things. And if you don't know what I mean, then it's kind of hard to check. So a compound predicate is when your subject performs two or more actions. And those are usually joined by a conjunction. So I could say, the boys swim and dive in the lake. So all the boys are doing this. Jenny sings and dances very well. So there's two verbs here. The janitor cleans the rooms and fixes broken machinery. So those are called a compound predicate. Sometimes people aren't sure if those are correct, but those are perfectly correct. Those are fine. So there are also three main types of verbs. And this is important because a lot of times in school we get taught about action verbs and not about anything else. And then when we're doing more adult type writing, we're like, wait, I'm not really sure where the verb is in here because these don't sound like the kind of verbs we were talking about in school, like running, jumping, and sleeping. So there's three main types of verbs. Action verbs like running, jumping, sleeping. Then what we call state of being verbs. Those are where you're describing things. And then finally, there's helping verbs, which generally work with an action verb. So the first type of verb describes their actions: run, dream, think, work, sleep, washing, hug, swim, fish, draw, write. The second is basically the verb to be, but it has a lot of different forms like be, am, is, are, was, were, will be, and have been. Those are all forms of the verb to be. And in a sentence, I might say something like, the building was falling down. And was doesn't sound like an action verb, but it's describing the state of the building. The building is falling down. And then the third type of verb helps another verb. And that makes what they call a verb phrase. I am buying some groceries. He has been out all night. Okay. So if I'm looking at the verbs or the simple predicates in these sentences, I want to look at the complete or the compound predicate. So we already looked at the subject earlier. We know that's the dog. Over here, I've got jumped over the wall. That is my whole predicate. And just the word jumped, that's my verb or my simple one. Okay. The cats ate and slept all evening. So everything that starts with the verb and goes on, that whole thing is my predicate. Ate and slept are the two verbs, which I'm just going to kind of highlight here. She is having a rough morning. So everything that starts with the is going on to the end is my predicate. Oh, and this one forgot the period. Sorry, that's me. Is having is our verb. Sorry, it's kind of fussy. I will be running the marathon next week. You can see the predicate is kind of the main part of the sentence. And that's why sometimes it can be really easy to just do the predicate and forget the subject. Okay. And like we talked about yesterday, in some different languages, the subject isn't really important. Some languages just use like a little ending at the end of a verb that tells you where the subject is. She cooked dinner. and washed laundry. The whole thing is your predicate, and the cooked is your verb, and of course, washed. Okay. And then last, Susan and Jack are flying home today. This whole part is your predicate, and our flying is your verb. And again, the reason this is important is I am going to be asking you to notice whether you've got subjects and verbs. It's generally pretty simple when we're doing simple sentences, but we're going to move on to more complex sentences, and at that point it becomes harder. So that's why we're practicing with the basic stuff first of all. So going back to the main assignment, this is just some nice little posters that talk about the grandfather teachings if you want to take a look at that. There's also a really nice set of posters from Kwaichian that looks at the teachings. Hang on. Okay. In case you're just looking for some ideas, I wouldn't want you to just copy this, but it can give you some ideas if you're feeling stuck, right? It also gives you the word in the English orthography and in the syllabics. I'm not sure if this is the Ojibwe or Ojibwe. And then we've got bravery, respect, love, and honesty. It's humility. So these are just some ideas to kind of if you're stuck and generating some ideas. I so want to make this work. I don't know if it'll let me. No, I don't think it will. And what if I jump? No. All right. If you get a chance, the Ontario Native Women's Association does a really lovely little series of videos with different people talking about what the different teachings mean in their life and how they've affected them or utilized them to help themselves. Again, if you're feeling stuck for ideas, this is a great series to kind of look through and give yourself some ideas. Okay, that is basically all I have to say today. Let me just kind of quickly check. Oh, still getting used to Zoom. Hang on a second. Okay. All right, I still have some people. Does anybody have any questions about this assignment or about anything else that's going on in the course? No? Okay. If you're stuck, I'm just going to go back to my contact page. This is the easiest way to reach me. My email is jillian.percy@nnacschools.org, and I check it constantly throughout the day. I'm also here till about 6:30 tonight. If you want to give me a phone call and talk about anything, that's great. Feel free to work ahead if you are very confident in your writing and feel like, oh, I know what to do, and I'm just going to dive forward. Please feel free. The only thing I ask is please send your assignments in as you work on them. Sometimes I have people try and send me like 40 assignments at once, and that will take me a really long time to finish. If you're registered in the radio Zoom, this one ends kind of middle of April. If you're registered as an independent learning student, you have until June 13th to finish up. So if you're not sure which one you are, again, message me and I will be happy to let you know. Thank you so much for coming out, guys. It was nice to have actual people in the class listening. And I probably talked a little fast and I apologize, but I will talk again tomorrow if you feel like showing up. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.